Okay, I think we'll kick off. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Stephen Kelly. I'm Chief Executive of Manufacturing Northern Ireland. You're all very welcome along this morning. This is a quick webinar on the Climate Change Levy and whatever opportunity that exists for manufacturers to reduce that impact that the levy has on their energy bills. Delighted to be joined this morning by Ross Devlin and Blaine Fitzsimons from Layton. They've been working with a couple of local manufacturing businesses very successfully in achieving a rebate for those businesses on their climate change levy, which forms part of their energy bills. I'll hand over to Blaine and Ross in a second, just to say that we will be taking questions during this session. If you could put the questions either in the Q&A function or in the chat function, as soon as the presentation ends, we'll get around to those questions and we can ask those questions direct of the two guys that have joined us this morning. We're recording this session, so bear that in mind. We'll be sharing a recording of the session at the end, so there's no need to take frantic notes as you go through this. You're all very welcome, as I said, and I'll hand over to Ross now, Ross Devlin from Layton, UK. And Ross, you're very welcome, and I'll let you take us all through your presentation. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks very much, Stephen. Really appreciate the opportunity to join you all this morning. Good morning, folks. As Stephen says, I'm Ross Devlin. I'm one of the business development managers here at Layton, UK, joined by my colleague Blaine, who will be helping present. He's one of our senior commercial partners. Just to kick things off, as Stephen says, we're happy to take any questions towards the end, just to save us kind of interrupting the presentation. But we shouldn't be taking any longer than kind of 20 minutes to half an hour just to go through this. So yeah, any questions towards the end, just feel free to put them into us. But we'll kick off. I can change the slide. So to give you a bit of an introduction into who Layton UK are, we are one of the largest independently owned tax incentive consultancies in the UK. Came about in 2010 and have been operating within the UK in the last sort of 25 years now. We've got over 300 employees within the UK, and as of 2021, we satisfied over 5,000 clients in helping them access various different tax incentives, which has resulted in over £200 million worth of savings to them. I'll pass it to Blaine just to touch upon a little bit about more of what we offer here at Layton UK.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Just going to keep this bit really brief. I think it's really important to say at this point is we don't do energy brokerage at all, so we don't want to win your business or become your energy suppliers. I always think that's really important to say, so we can keep very unbiased to this. As Ross said, we're not trying to become your accountants. We're tax specialists. We're doing a number of different things across Europe, and actually in the continent our biggest products are actually on energy. So we do a number of different energy tax reliefs. I'm going to give you a brief overview because there is a few that's not just climate change levy as well, even though that's the main one that we'll focus on. We also work with a lot of businesses who do patents. Our core business in the UK is the R&D tax credits, which I'm sure all of you will be well aware of, and if you're not, I'd be shocked. We do a lot of the capital allowances side, but it's only really for people who have kind of done extensions on the property, a lot of property acquisitions as well. That's a big part of our business, and a lot of people who spend money on kind of upgrading or building a new property. We don't do any of the plant machinery. All that stuff is really basic, and your accountant will take care of that. Probably not relevant to yourselves, but we also cover land remediation as well. I want to go to the next slide, Ross. So there's probably about 5 or 6 different energy tax services we do. I'm one of the people who leads the product in the UK. We get involved in some really complex claims. We've dealt with approximately 1,000 companies across the UK on energy tax services, ranging from people. I've got clients who turn over a couple of billion a year, and I've got clients who turn over £1 million a year. So it's very, very diverse, the sort of companies that we deal with, and we treat everyone exactly the same. It's a very similar process, which I'll go into in a bit more detail. So the main scheme we're obviously here to talk about is the Climate Change Levy, which Ross will go into more detail on, but that's when we look at your electricity usage, your natural gas usage, which there's very little to none of in Northern Ireland, and also any propane, if any, that you buy and you use. These schemes and all of them are actually very much based on the processes you do as a business and also what you actually manufacture. So not all businesses can qualify for this, but if you work in the manufacturing industry, that there's a high probability, that's obviously why we're here today, that you will qualify for at least one of the schemes. And if not, we can put you in the right direction, because we don't cover all of them. There's a couple of the more basic ones that we're happy to point you in the right direction of as well. So the main one is a climate change levy that Ross will cover in a bit more detail. The other schemes that we do that probably be more relevant to yourselves is something called the EII scheme, that stands for the Energy Intensive Industry Scheme, and also the UK ETS compensation scheme. A lot of you will be familiar with the UK ETS scheme, and you guys, obviously it's a bit different with Brexit at the moment, where Northern Ireland fall in this, so there is actually, you guys actually still fall under the EU ETS scheme, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about, but basically, if your business has a real high energy usage on energy and you're manufacturing certain things, which we'll go into a bit of detail in a bit of time, it is worth having a chat to us after this as well. We can talk you through it in a bit more detail, but probably relevancy wise, it will much more be the climate change levy. So in a nutshell, I'll pass over to Ross for the climate change levy side, but if your business does have a real high energy usage, ask some questions at the end and we can talk you through it, because it's quite a complex scheme. Over your
Appreciate that, Blaine. Thanks very much. So yeah, to kind of put things in a nutshell there, guys, what we're keen to focus on today is the climate change levy, as Blaine's pointed out. For those who are unaware, the climate change levy is an environmental tax that every company in the UK is eligible to pay, but certain companies can qualify for an exemption from it. So far, we've managed to work with a handful of manufacturing NI members on this, as well as other companies within the UK. So, and as Blaine rightly said, it's attached to your energy bills, so your electricity and your gas usage. Now, appreciate there's a limited main supply of gas in Northern Ireland, so propane is the key thing that we're looking at there. It is worth noting, however, if you use argon at all, that we can't look at it within that. But just to touch upon how the scheme is actually incentivised, what you can do is you can go back and claim the last 4 years worth of CCL that you've paid on your energy bills, and that can come as a rebate, while moving forward it reduces your monthly bills by about 5 to 7%, dependent on the sort of exemption that we could get for you. Now, to cover off some of the qualifying activities, what we're really focusing on, or where we found the opportunity to be for manufacturers, is in the sort of metal manipulation side of things. So if you're a manufacturer and as part of your processes you either roll, form, punch, bend, weld, debar, for instance, there's an array of different processes that aren't necessarily limited to the list we've got here. I think if we were to include them all, would be taking a little bit longer than half an hour to run through them, but that's what we're interested in. For avoidance of doubt, the sort of processes that don't qualify in that sort of field is the removal of any metals. So what you'll find, or what we tend to find with a lot of manufacturers who are dealing with metals, is that you might have to cut them to size, or cut the processes to size to begin with, or sections. That is the sort of usage that we can't include within the scheme. So if you're removing a metal, so cutting, again, this also includes the likes of any of your CNC machining sort of things, so milling, turning, grinding, etc. The sort of precision engineering side of things, these unfortunately don't qualify. But however, some of the other processes we're looking at is the likes of cold forming, any sort of work with precious metals, forging and casting as well. Coatings and shot blasting is a big one. What we tend to see, which also kind of falls within the heat treatment side, is if you're painting any of your end products and then curing them in ovens, that's something that we can look at as well. So obviously we've got cement, concrete and plaster, anything to do with glass, and I do mean anything, that qualifies immediately, ceramics and refractory products. But that's kind of the CCL side in a nutshell. We obviously wanted to touch upon the energy intensive industry scheme as well. we'll briefly touch upon it. It's slightly more convoluted to qualify for, but if you do it, it's certainly beneficial. But essentially what the EII scheme looks to do is mitigate some of the taxes that are applied to your energy bills. Now, unfortunately, it's not as lucrative within NI as it is within the rest of the UK. We can only look at one of the taxes out of the three, which is the renewables obligation. But if you're a sector who's using a lot of energy, or if you fall within a sector on the list below that's using a lot of energy, as Blaine touched upon, it's certainly worth having a chat with us to discuss in a bit more detail to see if there's something or an opportunity there to save some money on those electricity bills. But Blaine, if you get anything else to add on that side of things?
We'll probably just cover a bit more on the CCL. I think again, I mentioned we've probably worked with about 1,000 clients on energy tax sort of over the last kind of 5 or 6 years, kind of all over the UK. And the most common bit of kind of tax we've done for us is the Climate Change Levy. As a business, it's the most transactional thing we do. What basically the Climate Change Levy replaced a couple of years ago was the old CCA agreements, which a lot of people still have, the climate change agreements. And I would say if you get a climate change agreement, not every company that qualifies for a CCA can actually get CCL. It's a bit of a muddle, even though it's the same tax, if anyone's familiar with it, but it's still something some industry bodies do that is worthwhile. The main difference between them, the climate change agreement that some of you might have on this call, you do need to jump through a bit more hoops. You need to get a survey done. You need to kind of every year agree to reduce your usage, kind of get all the LED light bulbs that I'm sure a lot of you guys will do. Where the CCL is a bit more transactional, it's a bit more kind of tax and paper based. The main important factor of that is getting somebody basically to look at the manufacturing processes you do and give a fair estimation of actually the percentage of processes you do that qualify and percentage of processes you don't. So for argument's sake, the revenue, which obviously this goes to HMRC, that's where the money comes from ultimately, is they want to make sure that somebody's had a good approximation look to the business and not just put through 100% exemption all the time and just kind of tick the box with the paperwork. It is important to look at it properly and get an approximate figure of what percentage of energy usage counts and what doesn't. One thing to add on that note as well, what the revenue looks for, it is an approximation. What we don't need is, we don't need you to go look at all your machines. We don't need to come out and do a survey. We don't need to look at how much kind of power you use during the day at night. We're wanting a really kind of fair and reflective estimation. And when we've obviously done this as many times as we do, we obviously know what machines are power hungry, what machines aren't, and the ones that kind of tend to not qualify, that are power hungry for use that qualify. It's obviously your plasma cutters, your laser cutters, your water jet cutters. The only companies that kind of we find that really kind of never qualify for this are companies who are exclusively precision engineers. So as Ross said earlier on, milling and turning just not go with the revenue at all. But occasionally we do get precision engineers who will basically treat the raw metal or coat it if it's like electrolysis, or if it's I mean, very rarely they do the full shebang. But precision engineers are probably the worst at getting CCL. That's only bad news for you guys who are on the call that are precision engineers. So yeah, just want to add that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on the CCL side before. I was going to add a couple of points on the EII as well.
No, I don't think so. I think if you've got anything else to add on the EII, it probably brings us on nicely to the delivery point of view. But yeah, if you've got anything to add on EII, go for it.
Yeah, I think the EII, this is kind of where I specialise. There's only about 240 different businesses in the entirety of the UK that have the EII tax exemption, and it is actually really worthwhile. For those of you that kind of know a lot about the energy side, it's about 3.5 pence of a total tax exemption per kilowatt you get off it. It's actually rising to 4 pence early next year. The only bad thing about Northern Ireland based companies is, as Ross mentioned, that it is a bit less that you get back in NI, just because there's some taxes that companies based in NI don't pay. So the probably net is closer to 2 pence for NI based companies. So it's 2 pence per kilowatt. So we really target businesses who use a lot of energy. That's what it comes down to. So if you feel you're losing a lot of it, a lot of energy and producing a lot of what you produce, and I'm more talking in tons of things rather than items, it's worth having the chat. The only thing to add with the EII, the reason so few people have it is you have got to be in a certain financial situation. So what we look at is your accounts for the last 3 years. We have a look at your capital expenditure as well, and there's quite a complex calculation we've got to do in regards to your wages, your salary bill, and obviously your EBITDA number. So if you're a company that makes a lot of money year on year, which hopefully all you are, it's likely you won't qualify that for this unless your energy usage is really high. And just to make one thing clear as well, and this is equally on the CCL as it is the EII, in the past couple of years, you'll all be aware that energy prices have went up substantially. That we don't need to speak about that today. There's no mystery why, but what's important to realise is the only thing that's actually increased is the wholesale price. All the taxes have actually stayed the same. So even though the wholesale prices went up exponentially, the taxes actually haven't increased. So the taxes now are just a smaller percentage of the overall cost than what they were before. So the government has made some strides to kind of mitigate how much tax you pay. And some of you will probably have had the ETII that has came out recently, which is separate to the EII. Hopefully some of you guys take advantage of that, but they are only slowly catching up. So there is only so much that the government have done, and that's why we've kind of got off the back of it, because we've done it for so many years on other products. Hopefully that was helpful. Ross. Oh, it's me, back to me actually, isn't it? For the
yeah, it just brings us nicely on to the delivery side of things. So
sorry, you need to listen to me again, guys. Sorry. So yeah, as I said earlier on, the delivery is actually really straightforward. No matter what project we do. So I've obviously put a bit of a slide together on what we do, but I will talk you through it. So for the CCL, what we need is we have a discovery call to find out what the business does, what you manufacture, what your usage is, and kind of how many different buildings you've got, how many different meters. We just basically want to understand everything about the business, what plant machinery you've got, what buildings you've got, as I mentioned, and get a really kind of clear idea. Once there, we can identify sort of off your invoices and what you've told us how much we could potentially get back for you. As Ross mentioned, you get a 4-year rebate, so you can go back 4 years with the tax you've paid, then you get a tax exemption moving forward. You do need to maintain that tax exemption, but that's not something that's probably massively relevant today, but I'm happy to answer that question at the end, how you maintain it, because it's not actually straightforward, because HMRC never likes to be straightforward. From there, we then have a technical call with one of our energy consultants. So they're basically like an unbiased third party. So it's not just myself or Ross sort of dictating what it is. They'll come in and have a similar conversation with you all over Teams. Just it keeps it easy, keeps it straightforward. And we look at what you do, what your plant machinery is, and we can basically work together to give you an approximate percentage. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this isn't something that's designed to be exact down to the kilowatt. We're looking for a fair and a fair approximation. That is the best way to do this. Once we've got that, we're at a very small report for the revenue. We get letters of authority from yourself, so we can speak to all the energy companies you've had for the last 4 years, and all your current energy company as well. We'll send everything away to the revenue to get signed off. We'll contact your energy companies and either deal with them really nicely or fight with them for the next 6 months. It really depends on how busy the company is at the time, kind of who you're with. Some suppliers are excellent to deal with, others are challenging, which is the most PC way I can go about that. And then what we do is we basically work. We've put 6 to 8 weeks on that. It can be sooner, it can be 6 months. It really depends. I would say the average is probably about 2 months. That probably takes us to do CCL. And we actually don't invoice you until you've had all the savings. So black and white, you get the cash back in your bank directly through the energy company. So you get the money from the revenue. So we at the end can invoice you for whatever the invoice will be at that stage, depending on how high your usage is at the end for the work we've done. So in summary, we probably need maybe 2 hours of business time, roughly. We get you guys LOA so we can contact the energy companies. We get all the invoices for you. You need to send us a sample. We do all the tech side ourselves. We liaise with HMRC and all the energy players ourselves internally. So all you really need to do is turn up to the technical meeting, get the letters of authority signed, and basically leave the rest to us. The other energy schemes that we do, the EII and the EU ETS, as I mentioned, are a lot more complex. We also look at your capital expenditure and a lot more detail. We look at the tonnage, we look at your accounts, we look at 5 years accounts for some of them as well, and we have to do a lot more than an in-depth review and report. But again, that's something I can go over. But being honest, it actually doesn't take much more of the business time. It's a very, I mean, trying to think of the best phrase, but it does not take a lot of time from your internal time. Internally it does for us, but for yourselves it doesn't, which is the most important thing. So that's
the key thing to outline on that, as Blaine's kind of saying there, is that as soon as we have all the relevant information, timing wise, it can be very straightforward from the client's point of view. So we tend to try and, but with any of our services that we offer, we tend to try and impose as little time on your business as possible with this. But like anything with HMRC as well, because we do get questions from clients on this whenever we're putting any sort of documentation to HMRC, we offer a sort of defence with it as well. So should they come back with any questions, we deal with that because we provided the paperwork to them. And again, it's also worth outlining that HMRC have set aside a pot of money for energy suppliers to pay this out. So in actual fact, although the forms go to HMRC and the claim is made to HMRC, the payment is actually from your energy supplier. So it's often paid out a little bit quicker than HMRC normally paying out any other benefit you might go to them for. So that's the tendency that we tend to see anyway. So it's just worth kind of outlining that as well. But again, that's caveated with, as Blaine said, if we're dealing with any sort of challenging suppliers, that might be elongated for whatever reason. But apologies, I cut you off there. Yeah.
No, not at all, Ross. I was just going to add, for those who deal with the revenue a lot, I was going to cover the inquiry rate for CCL. And actually, the other energy tax schemes, the inquiry rate is actually scandalously low. To be really frank with you, we've only had. I mean, I've personally been involved with probably 3 inquiries. I think as a business, our inquiry rate must be sub 3% for energy tax. I don't know why that is, but it does happen, especially when it's a larger claim. But that's why we endeavour to front load it, get it right, get it compliant, because as a business, as Ross said, we spend a lot of time on inquiries from the revenue with all our products a year. So we're trying to minimise that as much as possible. So on the one hand, you want to push it and get you the most financial impact we can get, but on the other hand as well, we want to keep that inquiry rate still low, because if the revenue look into this and there's a couple of dubious claims, that they're just going to open a whole can of worms. So one of our main priorities is the compliance part of it. That is a big ethos of our business and how we run it. We are a technically heavy company. We have a lot of internal engineers from all backgrounds, from software engineers to mechanical engineers to architects, that's with the R&D background that we've got. So the technical side is paramount to us, something I just wanted to stress as well. And again, on the other tax things, like the EII, and there is 2 or 3 other ones that I've not mentioned that we do because it's some really specialist stuff, to be quite frank, as it's actually DBT, Department for Business and Trade, we deal with. It was called BASE for all you that are familiar. The government department's changed a few months ago. The reports that we do for them before we get sign off are a lot more intense. Sometimes we need to get pictures of the manufacturing site for argument's sense. Had to get pictures with chickens in it before as well. There's a fun fact for you. So they said, send me pictures of chickens on site to prove that chickens are there. True story. And we had to send pictures of chickens. Really fun, sending the Department for Business and Trade pictures of chickens. So
yeah, that's not a prerequisite for every claim we do, by the way, just in case anyone's sat there worrying. So that was just a specific client.
1 in 50. Just when they asked me for pictures, I just kind of thought, okay, we'll send the pictures, whatever you like. But yeah, that's probably the delivery in a nutshell. And as Ross said there, as long as you do exactly kind of what we're asking in a reasonable time frame, the onus is on us to do it. Over to you, Ross.
It kind of brings us on to our last slide. As Blaine touched upon, we work with a number of businesses with varying sizes, but again, it's because we are so consultant heavy, it kind of ties in with a lot of the international work we do. So we are across a number of different countries, sorry, as you can see here. All in all, to offer as many services as to clients as we can, and to cover the scope of them. So by having the sort of scope that we do, allows us to build those tailor-made answers that companies need. So yeah, it's just a list of some of the companies we work with worldwide there below. But In short, that's it from our side of things. I don't know if we want to open it up to any sort of questions now. If Stephen or Connor's noticed anything come through in the chat, I'm happy to stop sharing. Obviously, I'm happy to also send this slide deck across to yourselves afterwards to be shared with anyone. But yeah.
Thanks, Ross and Blaine. Thanks. A couple of questions, I suppose, from the presentation. Excuse me. So with CCL, provided people are involved in particular types of processing, it's essentially just an automatic qualification. It doesn't matter about the level of bill that they have. It doesn't matter about industry, or it doesn't matter about energy savings year on year. I mean, what are the parameters here in terms of being able to enter into this scheme?
There are none, to be honest, Stephen. So obviously we have internal parameters with ourselves from a commercial standpoint, which we're more than happy to chat to individual companies about. But in a nutshell, to answer your question, there's nothing stopping companies who are doing those processes to engage in the scheme.
Okay.
The original document, Stephen, is like a 1,000-page behemoth document the EU put together about 10 years ago. And we sort of piggyback on that. All that is probably a bit more than 10 years by this time, to be honest with you. So the actual documentation itself and legal side, if you're asking that, it is very wide reaching. But then it gets to the intricacies of some stuff does qualify and some stuff doesn't. And that's the bit where you need to know what you're doing to make sure it's right. Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure. Because I think there is some view out there that with the climate change levy, you establish a level, and the aim is actually to reduce your energy usage year on year in order to qualify. But that's the EII scheme, isn't that correct?
No, so actually that's the climate. So this is where it gets confusing. That's actually the climate change agreement. So this is the government love naming things like this. So basically, the climate change agreement, you're absolutely bang on, and a lot of people get confused at this. With that, you've got to then target yourself to kind of reduce your emissions, reduce your usage. But the CCL exemption scheme doesn't. So all that is that's more of a transactional exercise. And what the climate change agreement does actually gives you a 92% exemption on electricity, and it's either an 86 and 87% on your gas that won't be relevant automatically. But you need to jump through a lot more hoops. And I would say if you're in that scheme and you manage it, great. And the people who are actually better at that schemes are the ones like, give an example, like British Plastics Federation, for example. They're really good at it, and all their members.
Metals Federation as well.
Metals Federation is another excellent one. But a lot of people who can only get the CCL scheme actually can't enrol in the CCA scheme for various reasons. Plus, a lot of people don't want to do it because it's so much hassle.
Yeah, because this kind of leads me to a kind of direct question that's come in from a member here who are part of the FDF CCL rebate group scheme. So it must be the Food and Drink Federation CCA rather than CCL rebate group scheme. I mean, would it be beneficial for people to exit some of those schemes and just go straight for the CCL, or are they better off just staying with the schemes that they're at?
Stay with that. And this is the thing where the CCA is open to a lot more businesses in some ways, but they only open it every so often. I think it has actually been open recently for it as well. So if they're in that CCA scheme, don't move, because it's so much hassle. I mean, on paper, if you qualify for both schemes, on paper, it's actually better to be in the CCL scheme because it's less hassle and you get more money back, but marginally. However, if you weren't in the CCA scheme and you qualify for both and you have two options, do the CCL scheme. We actually don't offer the CCA scheme, and the reason why it's a real pain to go through. But if you want to do that, we'll actually happy point you in the direction to say go and speak to these people and they'll sort it for you.
Okay, thanks. So that then leads me to the EII and what the parameters are there, just so people are aware. Is there a minimum bill size? Is it a minimum value in terms of energy usage as part of your production process? You had on your slide, it was about heavy industrial users. So is there a definition of what heavy is?
No. So it's so difficult to explain on one call. To put this in perspective, I have clients who I get a tax exemption of £5 million a year on EII, and I've got clients who I get a tax exemption of 40 grand a year on the EII. It completely depends on your turnover, how many tons you're manufacturing, what your usage is, what your EBITDA is, what your salary is, and I know that's not helpful. The easiest way I'd say to you, if you're a company that's making EBITDA profit year on year on year, and it's good EBITDA profit, you're likely not to qualify for the scheme. But if you're a client who has maybe had a bad year because of COVID, or if you've went up and down because you've had a lot of capex spend, or your depreciation's low, so your EBITDA is quite low, kind of artificially, and your usage is quite high, it's worth having the conversation. So it's all about that high usage. The only way I could say this, and hopefully this makes sense, and I know Ross is going to laugh because this is the way I've taught the guys to do it, but what you want to look at is your energy usage over your turnover. So how many kilowatts you use a year, you want to compare that to your turnover of energy, and if that number in millions is about 5% of your turnover, then there's a chance you can qualify. Hopefully that makes sense to some of you, and apologies I can't be more articulate about that.
I was just going to elaborate on that, because it does seem, whenever we start chatting about EI, it seems it's very cloak and dagger. So to remove the cloak and dagger element from it, what we're looking for, Stephen, to answer the question is that calculation that we do. We look for your GVA, and the GVA is calculated by looking at your EBITDA and your staff salaries, and then it's divided by your electricity costs. Now, what we need is that to be sitting at about 20% intensity for a business to qualify. Now, again, just blotting that out, it's quite complex if you don't know the ins and outs of the scheme, which is why it can be quite tricky to qualify for. But as Blaine says, if your usage is that sort of 5% of turnover, then absolutely have a question about it, or come chat to us and see if it's something that you can access. But again, it can be quite a convoluted scheme. It's certainly not like the transactional nature of the CCL. So I'm hoping that removes a bit of the cloak and dagger element of it there. If that kind of helps join dots. If not, feel free to ask any more questions.
Yeah,
sure. And kind of last couple of things for me, without naming the company or the individual companies involved, but can you give me a kind of rough example of a journey that you've taken for a local manufacturing firm here in Northern Ireland, and what the outcome was for that?
So more often than not, we tend to engage companies off our own backs. So I engaged a company, manufacturer in Northern Ireland, who manufactured, I believe it was equipment for quarrying equipment. Sorry. Again, we had a discussion about the processes and the products they manufactured. Ticked a lot of the boxes. Obviously, as I said, the initial part of the process in manufacturing, they cut sections to size, and then they began to fabricate. So pretty much qualified the majority of the fabricating. But again, they also painted their end products and cured them in ovens, which was, again, fantastic for the gas usage they had, because we were able to get that. I think all in all, we managed to get about 80% exemption on their electricity and 100% on the gas. And it resulted in, I believe, £30,000 savings from the 4-year rebate, and moving forward, obviously the reduction. So
on my side as well, and I'm not going to give it away because there's one of your members. I actually got one of your members $250,000 back about 2 years ago, and they were a large business who works with metals. Probably the best way to, without going to specifics, say that they're a fabrication business and they work with metals. There's a bit of welding involved, a bit of cutting involved. They didn't count, but there's a lot of basically a lot of fabrication work, funnily enough, and a lot of powder and coating work as well. We got them back 250,000, and they will continue to get a tax exemption about sort of 50k a year moving forward.
Worth mentioning as well, Stephen, if companies change supplier over the course of their exemption, we do assist in applying that to your new supplier. So sometimes don't feel that if you do get a CCL exemption that you're then linked to that supplier now, because that's where it is. You can actually take that exemption with you. So if, for instance, your broker manages to get you a better price on a new supplier, fantastic. If we've assisted with the exemption, we can also assist with applying that to your new supplier at no extra fee. So
sure. And I mean, this is an enormously complex part of business, and it's deliberately complex, I think, from the energy industry.
Yeah.
And it appears deliberately complex from the government as well. So we've got CCL plus CCAs, and people don't know which one they potentially fall into. Then we've got the EII and then the ETII. Both of them sound very similar. But then added on top of all of that, you've got obviously the supports that the government had been providing for business last year and should be providing this year, and there seems to be some delay on those supports coming through. I mean, just as a minimum, kind of demystifying some of that is probably worth a conversation, I would suggest, just so people know what is what.
I can fill you in on something, Stephen, actually, something that we've worked on recently, the government support that released. So the government support, it was called two things, and for the life of me, I can't remember, but it's basically what the ETII was. Some of you on this call.
Energy bills discount scheme.
That's it, energy bills discount scheme. Thank you, Ross. The one in the summer that they released, what we figured out a few months ago is that is actually only applicable. So I think you got up to 9p off a unit, but it's only applicable if you signed a new energy contract between June 22 and January 23. So what happened was everyone under the sun has applied for the scheme. We done it for a lot of clients as well, but a lot of people done it off their own back, and a lot of people actually done it with their brokers as well. So what's happened is we've got all these businesses out there waiting for because it's back to June it was dated from, waiting for a back pay from June, but because they didn't sign their contract in a specific period, they're actually not eligible for the scheme. And the issue in the blocker is, even though the government would have issued you a certificate, that doesn't mean you're going to get the exemption, because the energy companies are absolutely swamped at the moment for various things, but mainly this. So if you're sitting there waiting to get a discount, it might actually not come and it might not happen. Just to fill you that.
How that differentiates from, so that's ETII.
Yes.
How EII differentiates is the price of your energy each month is also attached with different taxes. The EII scheme allows you to essentially be exempt from one of those taxes, which is referred to as the renewables obligation. So that's where the 2p per kilowatt that Blaine was talking about in that scheme, that's where that comes in. So the ETII was an overall sort of rebate, I believe, that was available to
on the wholesale price.
On wholesale price, similar to what the energy bills discount scheme was prior to that. EII is a tax exemption, and EU ETS is a compensation that's paid out if you qualify again. So it's three different things that can be convoluted, and likewise the CCA is agreements that, as you touched upon, Stephen, the overall aim is to reduce the energy you're using, whereas CCL is a fairly straightforward transactional exemption that you can apply for, provided that you're not part of a CCA agreement. So hopefully that demystifies a little bit of it. As I say,
I'm glad we've kept this light, Ross. Really.
Yeah, I know. Christ, we've really.
I do apologise. It's not us, I promise.
I've run out of little tiles on my Scrabble board here in front of me for all these schemes. I mean, we have had quite a bit of concern over the summer about the energy bills discount scheme.
Yeah.
Because people just haven't been getting it. And
that's the bit I was explaining, and that's the problem, where if you didn't sign a new contract between last June and June 22 and January 23, you probably won't get it.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, I believe the confusion might be around the fact that the energy bills discount scheme didn't require that caveat to it that the ETII scheme did. So I think that's where the confusion, where a lot of companies decided, right, well, we got that the previous year, let's just apply for it again and see if we can get it again. The government threw in that caveat, which has caught a lot of companies out, unfortunately. So.
And a good few more as well.
Yeah, I think this one's going to run and run. I just to close this one off, I mean, there's a question there. This is about electricity and gas, and it's not just natural gas, it's bottled gas, potentially as well, if people have that as a supply, in terms of the big tanks that come and get refilled.
That's exactly. So if you've got, everyone's different. If you've got like a 500,000 or 2,000 or bigger litre propane tank on site, that will be charged CCL. If you've got like the 66 kilogram bottles or the smaller ones, they're actually not charged CCL. So if you do use a lot of kind of propane gas, that's it. But things like argon, oxygen, everything else you need for welding, nitrogen for laser cutters, unfortunately, they do not have CCL. One other one that's actually really important to mention, and I actually don't know if a lot of people in Northern Ireland have this, is LNG. There's been a spike of it after the Ukraine war, and some people have moved to LNG or LPG. I'm not saying that's a good or bad idea. I'm just saying what some companies have chosen. That also has CCL on it, and you can get the exemption as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to finish up here just to say thanks to Blaine and Ross. We will be sharing a recording of this after the event and the slides as well. If people are interested in having a conversation, the contact details will be on there. We always recommend people talk to other manufacturers like themselves, and the good news is that you've good case study here in Northern Ireland. It's not just coming in and hoping for the best. There's decent work has been done for firms in Northern Ireland, which is why we're happy to have this conversation with you as well this morning. Thanks very much for joining us. If anybody has any questions after the event, feel free to email me directly, and I'll put you in touch with Ross and Blaine. But thanks very much for today. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Stephen. Thanks very much, guys, for taking the time to listen to us this morning. It's been hopefully informative. So,
yep,
thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Take care.